that because a lot of the people who had the tariffs on products, like Swiss watchmakers in Rhode Island, were contributors to the Democratic Party. And he wanted those groups to get there. So instead he thought, no, we're not going to repeal the Smoot-Hawley tariff. Now, I have to give him credit. He did have some reductions in it during his presidency. I do want to give him credit there. He did not repeal it. You look at this kind of issue, for wisdom in agriculture, instead of repealing the tariff, we went to a Harvard economist, John D. Black. His solution was one I have to mention because only a professor would come up with this solution. Pay farmers not to produce. Normal people don't come up with that, right? Has anybody offered to pay you not to study?
Not yet.
Nobody has offered to pay me not to teach. But if somebody would pay me not to teach, I would then kick back some to pay you not to study. And if we worked that formula out together, we would be new dealers in action. Pay not to produce. Yeah, pay not to produce was the solution that this Harvard professor came up with. You can see a little bit the logic in it. Because if farmers are having low prices for their crops because they can't export, then if you decide you're not going to repeal the tariff, one way is, oh, well, they don't have much income and they're producing a whole lot. Let's get them to cut back their acreage and then pay them not to produce on that acreage. So that way they've cut back and that'll reduce the overproduction. And then you pay them to give them an incentive not to do that. And then you solve it. It was interesting because, a lot of them thought, well, boy, we've got that. We had a price fixture, in today's dollars, it would be $100 an acre. It was $10 an acre then. But if we're translating into purchasing power today, $100 an acre, they could take up to 1/4 of their land out of circulation. So, right, if you had a 320-acre farm, you could take 80 acres out, pay them not to produce it. Well, what they found was that they were sitting back saying, well, that solves that. They found that this is almost hard to believe. And in a farm state like Indiana, I know that this will shock some of you. Some of the farmers, when the inspectors came by, bribed the inspectors. And they said, no, let us just produce, and then we'll sell it, and we'll be paid not to produce, but we'll produce anyway. You look the other way. So we had a solution the Ag Department did to that. They sent inspectors around to inspect the inspectors who were inspecting the farms. And then we found that some people were trying to bribe both groups of inspectors. They hoped that wouldn't happen because this subsidy might not be large enough that you could split it with all those inspectors. But we still found that there was some trouble with that. So then the third step was we went to aerial photography. We drove planes over everybody's land and took pictures of it. Do you think you understand why the Ag Department was bigger than any other department in government except for the Department of Defense? We just had thousands and tens of thousands of people hired. How many of you think those inspectors worked free? See, this is where, remember we were talking about a doubling of the national debt? You're not only paying farmers not to produce, you're paying a stream of inspectors to come by to inspect. So this is going to be an incredibly expensive program. Not to mention the planes for the aerial photography, right? After 2 years of all of this expense, we finally got it working. We didn't get too much bribery going on, and we had the planes functioning. And then we discovered that we had shortages of the crops we were paying people not to produce. So that in 1935, we had to import 34 million bushels of corn, 13 million bushels of wheat, and 36 million pounds of cotton. we had to import from other countries. So visualize this. We're importing cotton from Brazil, paying top dollar for it. All the while, we're paying all these people in the South to $100 an acre not to grow cotton on their land. This was the AAA. Then we had a program that in some ways was worse, the National Recovery Act. This is another one that if you think about it and just isolate the thought, it's incredible that anybody would even come up with this. We thought we'll help business people by having them get together. We'll have it would be like having McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King get together and set a price for what you could charge for a hamburger. Only it was done with automobiles, every kind of product, furniture, for chairs and this, you set prices. You set them where you want to set them. I mean, if you're making shirts, do you think you're going to set your price very cheap or very expensive? You can set it wherever you want, and it's legally binding. You set it pretty high. Then they thought, uh-oh, what do we do if somebody then tries to give a discount to a customer? Right? I mean, for example, if you set the price of hamburgers, if McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King all set the price at $5 per hamburger, and we agreed, one of them could sit there and say, well, we'll really give it to you for $3. Come on in and we'll give you a rebate. No, that was illegal. And they said, if you give rebates, you go to jail. So we had, for example, part of my study for the book was the people who went to jail under the NRA. That's why I say in some ways that's worse. Because you have a program here with people going to jail for giving customers discounts. Let me give you just one example of this. His name was Jacob McGinn. Jacob McGinn he was in the pants pressing business, and the NRA code rate was 40 cents to press a pair of pants. He charged 35 because, see, his shop was off the main drag in New Jersey City, and all the major shops were on the main street, and he was 4 blocks off because he couldn't afford a main shop. So he said, I have to give customers a discount to get them over here. And so he charged 35 cents instead of 40 to press a pair of pants. He went to jail for doing so. The Washington Post said, and I quote, if McGinn had to charge less than the bright, shining tailor shop up the street if he wanted to continue to exist, the law said he couldn't. The New York Herald Tribune said, for a parallel, it is necessary to go to the fascist or communist states of Europe. Blunt talk, but with people going to jail for giving customers discounts, it's a remarkable program. It shouldn't be surprising that the Supreme Court shut that down, declared it unconstitutional. Where in the Constitution can you put people in jail for giving customers discounts? The final program I want to discuss is the WPA, Works Progress Administration. And this is the one where people were building roads and sometimes schools, buildings. You get people, especially if they're unemployed, together and put them on these road building crews. Do some of you may have grandparents or people like that who may have worked on that, or great-grandparents, or some may have worked on the WPA? There were a lot of people employed on the WPA. Roosevelt had a huge appropriation, at least for 1935. It was $4.8 billion. And it was the largest peacetime appropriation for a federal program in U.S. history. Now, it sounds good. People are unemployed. Now you'll have them build a road. The problem here is